It looks like we're streaming live now.
Okay, yeah. All right, then I will take my trusty gavel and, well, sorry, Toby, my dog's over here. Sorry. Okay, I'll call the meeting to order. I'm Vicki Walker. I am the director of the Oregon Department of State Lands, and by virtue of that, I am chair of the Management Commission. Welcome to the 156th regular meeting of the South Slough Reserve Management Commission. And we are, due to COVID-19 restrictions, and our grandchildren will learn all about this and talk about it in the future. But due to those restrictions, we are meeting by Zoom today. And there was an email, a public participation notice that went out through a press release asking people to email Catherine Andreessen at the South Slough if they wish to testify or appear, and no one has done so. Written comments were asked to be submitted by 4 p.m. yesterday, Wednesday, July 15, tax day, and we received no comments. So at this point, we have no public members that have asked to testify. We will go into introductions, and I'll have everyone introduce themselves and tell us who you are for the YouTube channel, if nothing else. And so Bree, you are on my left. I will start with you because you are the chair, the director of South Slough.
Good afternoon, Bree Adnok, South Slough Reserve Manager.
All right, and I'll go around the horn to my left, and it's probably different on your screen, but Dave Kronsteiner.
Dave Kronsteiner, Commissioner for the Port of Coos Bay.
And down below that is Allie.
Allie Helms, Science Staff.
And Kiri Howley. Okay, Kiri is with us. Not on the commission, but staff. Alice Yates.
Alice Yates, Stewardship Coordinator at South Slough Reserve.
Maya Watts.
Hi, I'm the Education Program Coordinator at the University of Oregon's Marine Lab, the Oregon Institute of Marine Biology.
And Ed Oswald.
Hi, everyone. I'm IT staff for the South Slough Reserve.
Keeping us all together here.
Yep.
Christine Moffett.
Hi there, Friends of South Slough President. Glad to be here. Hello.
And when you spoke, you moved on my screen. So now I got to figure out where I was. Catherine Andreessen.
Yeah, I turned off the video just for that moment.
Right. Okay, Catherine Andreessen. Kathy is with us. She is the administrative assistant, I believe, is your official title at the South Slough.
Yes, and she does not have a microphone, so that's why you can't hear her.
All right. Sabra Comet.
Hi, Saber Comet. I'm the new Coastal Training Program Coordinator, replacing John Bragg.
Awesome. And I'm not sure that the commission has met you yet. So at some point, it'd be nice to have a video so we can see a snapshot of you.
Give me a second.
Hi there. Say hello, everyone, to Saber Comet. She's you've been with us about 2 months now?
Yep.
Okay, good. And used to be in the NOAA office in Silver Springs, Maryland.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so, NOAA headquarters, although I've spent most of my adult life in Oregon, so it was a coming back home moment.
Good. So she is an Oregonian. All right, good deal. Jenny.
Hi, this is Jenny Schmidt with on the science team. I'm the watershed monitoring coordinator.
Thank you. Rebecca?
Rebecca Muse, Operations Manager, South Slough.
Queen of all things budget. Chief?
I'm Chief Warren Brainerd of the Coos Lorem Pausanias Tide, retired chief. There's a new chief taking over now, but I'm still on the commission.
Once a chief, always a chief, right?
Correct.
Well, who became the new chief?
Doc.
Oh, Doc.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. And then that means there's a new tribal chair, correct?
There is, Debbie.
Debbie. Oh, wow. Okay. I haven't kept up on the changes. Well, that's exciting. Okay, awesome. Schooler. Sean.
Hi, I'm Sean Schooler. I'm the research coordinator at the Reserve.
Awesome. Deborah.
Hi, I'm Deborah Rudd. I'm the public involvement coordinator here at the Reserve.
Lonnie, do we have video of you today or just the telephone?
I don't know. I'm Lonnie Mays, commissioner representing public, and I can't see how I can get the video to work on this. I'm clicking, nothing seems to want to click when it says start video.
Okay.
My apologies for that.
That's all right. We know you're there. And then there's a phone number here, but no name. I don't know who else is on here that I missed.
This is Chris Wall with NOAA. So if the phone number ends in 6244, that's me. We're not allowed to use Zoom on the computer. So apologies that I can't be on video with you guys today. But Chris Wall, NOAA's Office for Coastal Management.
Awesome. And then I think Robert Cowan, you are on the commission and you are with us.
Yes, I'm on the commission. I'm the director at the Hatfield Marine Science Center in Newport, Oregon.
Okay. And did I get you, Dave? I did.
Yes, you did.
Okay, great. And I got Maya and Bob Main is not with us and Trent Hatfield. So I think, oh, Todd Buchwaltz. He's on the phone.
That'd be me. Hi there, everybody. Good to see you all. Wish we could do this in person, but I'm Todd Buchholz. I'm the vice president for the Friends of the South Slough, and I'll turn my video back on.
Okay, great. I think that covers everyone that's on our Zoom call today. So thank you all. I appreciate that. We're going to now go to the next item on the agenda, which is to review the minutes from the 155th meeting, which was a long time ago, November 15, 2019. If you've all had a chance to read those minutes that Kathy puts together and does a fine job, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
It's Dave Cronstein here. I so move.
Is there a second? Somebody second. Okay, great.
Second.
Thank you, Maya. All right, all those in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
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 All those opposed? All right, the minutes are approved, and I'll be quieter this time to not scare my dog. All right, the next item on the agenda would be public input. Our two public members are Todd and Christine from the Friends of the South Slough. Did either of you want to say anything today?
Chair Walker, we have them at the very end of the agenda for an information update.
Okay, then we'll leave them at the end of the agenda then. Okay, so then we will move on to old business, and I'm going to turn it over to you, Bree, to update everyone on what's been going on.
Sure, thank you. So these three items have just sort of been running agenda items that I wanted to make sure I provided updates on, but they'll be very brief. So if you remember the Yonker Point easement application issue, we had a lawsuit from an applicant who wanted to put an easement to build a road across property that we manage. I believe I emailed everybody, but just so it's on the record and everyone's up to date, in February, on the 24th of February, Director Walker met with the DOJ counsel and the petitioner's lawyer, and the result of that discussion was an agreement to dismiss the case. So that is not going forward. I'll move on to old business item number 2, which is the potential transfer of management of the South Slough Reserve to University of Oregon. The only update I have is the last communication we've had with U of O was in January, and they were planning to reach out to the local tribes to discuss with them, and we have not heard anything since then.
Bree,
Yes.
are you working with the research office, the vice president for research at University of Oregon?
Yes, with Cass Mosley.
Okay, because David Conover has stepped down from that role, so I just wasn't sure that maybe that's part of the silence there.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we've been working with Cass Mosley, who's been the main person from the U of O related to this issue and communications with her. So I think they really were going to take the time to do the outreach to the tribes, and I think that hasn't happened, or we just haven't heard about it yet. But as we all know, with COVID ramping up shortly after January, I think everybody's timelines have changed quite a bit. Okay, the third old business agenda item is related to the Winchester Creek Coho spawning reach. If you'll remember, we've been working with Coos County in an attempt to do to trade some land that the reserve manages with some extended riparian area along Winchester Creek to protect the spawning reach there. The last update I have for that is that on March 15th, I sent the county forester examples of conservation easements. So 2 examples I sent, one was from the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, which is a nonprofit that's been working with Coos County to explore conservation easements in other areas. And then I also sent them an agreement that was sent to me from NOAA with a reserve in Texas. So it's another National Estuarine Research Reserve that holds a conservation easement on property. And so those were 2 examples of an agreement we could put in place with the county to manage that riparian area. And those were passed on to the county commissioners, but that was middle of March, right when COVID hit. And so their priorities were really focused on the COVID response. And they have not yet been able to shift to talk about this land trade. So those are the updates I have for those 3 items. Oh, you're muted if you're talking.
Yeah, unfortunately, there's a little pop-up that comes on and says you're muted. So thank you. Is there any discussion about any of those items from any member of the commission?
This is Chris Wall.
Yes.
I had a question regarding the land trade and on Winchester Creek. Do we know anything about timeline or plans for logging of that area? I remember we were trying to look into that to help determine urgency on proceeding with this. Do we have any further insights there?
Bree, I think you've talked to Lance more than I have recently, but they were not in a hurry to log it.
They weren't, they have actually marked out the buffer. So the existing buffer that would be required with the Oregon Forest Practices Act, they've marked that out and they've started logging in the area. I was told Lance would tell me if they were planning to log down close to the riparian area, and I have not heard from him that they've done that yet.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other discussion about the old business matters? All right, thank you. We'll move on to new business then. We have some really cool stuff to talk about under new business. So Bree, back to you. I think Rebecca actually is the first person to talk about the 2019 fees. So Rebecca?
Yes, so in your packets, you had an updated report of all of the fees that we have charged for the year of 2019, so January through the end of December. And we are required to report on these on a regular basis to the Management Commission. So we had very favorable information that came out this time. So if you remember right, the last time we met and discussed this, we raised our prices. And currently we are charging, let me see here. We are charging $25 a night for Spruce Ranch and the yurts, or $250 a month. And then we charge $100 for the auditorium for up to 4 hours. And then anything beyond 4 hours to the maximum of 8 hours, we charge $150 for that time period. So during 2019, just from Spruce Ranch, we generated $4,175. This was increased from our last report by $2,015. So we definitely increased our income from Spruce Ranch with the increase in rent. The other thing that was very significant during that time frame was our utility costs. So our total utility cost for Spruce Ranch for the entire year of 2019 was $1,322.97. This actually decreased significantly due to upgrades to the HVAC system. So the total net gain in income for Spruce Ranch during 2019 was $2,852. And the other thing that's really important for this time frame, we actually had Spruce Ranch closed from January through the middle of May for the renovation that we did with the kitchen and then all the cleaning up and painting that we did. So really that is only for about 7.5 months for the year. So we did really good at Spruce Ranch income wise during that time frame. The other thing for Spruce Ranch is the majority of our renters last year came from interns from other partners. So a lot of our partners like BLM and OSU and things like that, they lost out on rental opportunities from Southwestern Oregon Community College because they limited it to only their students. So we had a regular income coming in from our partners paying $250 a month for their interns to stay at Spruce Ranch, which really was a boom to our income there. The other thing is that our non-paying residents for 2019 included DSL employees, our reserve-based interns, which comes from a lot of different programs from Friends of South Slough. We have NOAA interns that come in, the NCOS, and then also Oregon Sea Grant. Let's see here. What else do we want to report on? On the auditorium, our total income generated for the auditorium was a total of $1,450. This income comes from different renters, which included OIMB, Oregon Coast Music Association, Coos Watershed, Oregon Society of Soil Scientists, the Coos Art Museum, and the general public, and then also the Pew Charitable Trust did a few events in the auditorium. Our staff recommendation is to keep the current rental costs at the same for the next 2 years, and then we will reevaluate again the next time we bring it back to the commission. And that's my report.
All right, thank you, Rebecca. I'm so excited about this. I know we spent some time talking about increasing those fees, and it was a good plan, I think. And also the renovations to the Spruce Ranch were critical to helping us save money. And who wouldn't want to rent that auditorium? It is so beautiful there. And especially now that the trees have been culled out and you can actually see the slough that this place is named for. So I'm excited. Great job. Let me open it up to conversation from any of the other commission members.
I move that we approve the fees report and keep the fees schedule the same for the next 2 years.
Okay, who seconded that? Robert or Lonnie? Lonnie, okay.
Lonnie.
All right. Okay, there's been a motion made to approve the fees report and keep the fee schedule the same for the next 2 years. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. All those opposed? Oh, I love your thumbs up, Robert. That's good. I'll take it. All right, hearing no objection, the report and the fee schedule is approved. Great job, Rebecca. All right, Alice is our next presenter on the hunting map update.
So Alice actually asked if I could cover this because she's at home right now with some potential distractions. So I'm gonna
as children.
Yeah, she is available for questions. So I'm gonna go over agenda item 2, which is related to updating our hunting map. And Alice really has done the analysis behind this and provided the information for you in this in your packets. And then Carrie Howley really has done a phenomenal job creating an updated map. So I'm going to share my screen just so folks can see our existing hunting map. Can you all see that? So the main thing, this item is really around kind of housekeeping, because if you look at this map, one important piece of property that we manage is not even on it. So north of where it says South Slough Reserve Hunting Map is the Indian Point property that we acquired in 2014. So we really need to update this map to show the lands that we manage in South Slough and then classify them as either open to hunting or closed to hunting. So this is our existing map, and it shows in red the area closed to hunting, which is primarily located around our visitor center and our main trail system that leads from the visitor center. And then what I'm going to show you next is our proposed hunting map, which zooms out a little bit. And so you can see here's the Indian Point property in red up at the top. So this is our proposed new map. And so I'll just go through the reasoning and the information in the packet, and then I'd be delighted to hear your thoughts on this. So basically our recommendation is to adopt this updated map that includes designating all of the lands in the South Slough that we manage, creating designated status. So basically all we're adding is this property, Indian Point up here, and showing that it's closed to hunting. So this authority falls within the commission, and I've just listed in your packet the statutes that were put in place to create the reserve and create the commission and its authority. And then Oregon Administrative Rule 142-010-0026 subsection, sorry, -0020 subsection section 6, which is related to the Management Commission's authority to prohibit hunting in specific areas for the protection of health, safety, and the welfare of the public. So the last time our hunting map was updated was in April of 2017. Really all we're suggesting is some kind of aesthetic changes, some more detail on this map. Another key piece I'll point out is that this map has been created, it's geo-referenced, and so a hunter could download this map to their phone and take their phone out in the field and be able to use it to determine where they are on the landscape. So this map is also bringing us into kind of into the technology that we have available to us these days. Okay, so the details about this property. The Indian Point property is adjacent to Crown Point Road. It's 236.19 acres of forested upland, salt marsh, and tide flats that border the South Slough estuary. The land was purchased with grant funding from the United States Fish and Wildlife Service through their National Coastal Wetlands Conservation Grant Program in 2014. And the primary objective was to support the longstanding efforts of the state of Oregon, NOAA, and other agencies and stakeholders to maintain the integrity of the South Slough estuary and to protect it from uses and activities that would alter the ecosystem and its natural dynamic processes. I will say that the reserve has a long history of hunting, and currently we allow hunting on over 5,000 acres of the lands that we manage in the reserve. Only 714 acres are currently closed to hunting. Prior to the acquisition of this property, the Indian Point property was privately owned, so hunting was not available and there was no public access available. Once it became state-owned land, it was automatically designated as hunting. However, for the reasons I put forth, or Alice put forth in the packet, and we all worked on this analysis and came to this conclusion, we feel that it should be closed to hunting. So the first reason is that the acquisition objectives do not include hunting. So as I mentioned, this was funding, grant funding that we used to purchase the property was awarded for really the sole purpose of conservation. And for restoration. So there were, you'll probably remember the restoration practices or the restoration plan that the commission had been part of the whole process of reviewing that plan and approving it. So the work that's been out there has really been for restoration for conservation purposes. The second reason is the safety and the welfare to the public. So the Indian Point Restoration Plan does include a public use plan that was approved by the Management Commission in November of 2017. And so that plan, if you'll remember, included the proposed development of a trail across the property. Currently, the reserve restricts hunting within 100 feet of trails. So the way the trail is designed through this public use plan really doesn't leave very much room for hunting that's not within 100 feet of the trails or within close proximity to the residences around the property. Which brings me to number 3, so communication with adjacent landowners. This area is surrounded by residential properties. The previous stewardship coordinator, Hannah Schrager, when she was developing the public use plan and the restoration plan, she communicated with a lot of people who live on Crown Point Road and noted considerable opposition by those landowners to opening up that property to hunting. And then the last reason, number 4, is the protection of sensitive ecological and cultural resources. So there are some sensitive sites on this property that's part of the reason that we want to create a trail system, so we can really dictate where people are going. We don't want to encourage people to go off the trail where they could be entering restoration sites or important monitoring sites that we have out there for our research and monitoring team, or culturally sensitive areas as well. So yeah, I guess I'll just wrap up by saying that once again, this is really kind of a housekeeping thing. It's not like this property was open to hunting before and we're closing it. We're still allowing over 5,000 acres of land available for hunting. And so our staff recommendation is that the Management Commission adopt the updated hunting map as we've proposed it and include the Indian Point property as closed to hunting. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Bree. Let's get a motion and a second on the table, and then we'll open it up to questions and discussion. Dave?
Motion to approve or?
Okay. There's a motion from Chief Brainerd to adopt the updated hunting map as proposed with the Indian Point property closed to hunting. Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Okay, we got a couple of seconds there, David and Maya. All right, so the motion's on the table. Let's have discussion or any questions for Bree. I will say that, as always, I appreciate the staff putting together a very comprehensive discussion about this. It makes it easy to make a decision and understand what's being presented in front of us. So I do appreciate that. And also that the homeowners that live out on that road are not interested in people shooting bows, arrows, guns, or whatever it is they hunt with near their home. So that's an important thing to keep in mind, I think. Okay, anyone else have any other questions or comments?
Hey, this is Alex Gates. I just wanted to clarify one thing that Bree mentioned. She did say that this map includes all of the land managed by South Slough. And I just wanted to point out that there are a few parcels that are not included in this map, such as Clam Island and Bull Island, and another couple of sections that are under our management. I just wanted to point out that they are automatically open to hunting because they are state-owned land. And we didn't include them in this map just because of scale. And so we felt like pulling in the entire sort of geographical range of these lands might make it a little bit confusing. So I just wanted to point that out.
Okay, thank you for doing that. Any other questions? Okay, then we will take a vote. We have a motion on the table. All those in favor of the recommendation and the motion that's been made to update the hunting map and close Indian Point to hunting, say aye.
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 Aye. Okay, that's unanimous. Thank you very much. Motion approved. Sorry, Toby. Okay, we will move on to the next item of new business, which is a staff presentation on the citizen science project on lamprey distribution. I think you're going to really enjoy this, Chief, as well as the rest of us. Sean and Deborah, I think you are on tap to give us that presentation.
Yep, yeah, we'll start out, and then Deborah was going to talk more about the citizen science aspect of this. And I believe Bree is going to be advancing the slides. So we're going to be talking about some of the cool research we're doing on lamprey along the coast, including in the reserve, but also outside the reserve. Next slide. So why do we care about lamprey? Well, there's a number of reasons. There's nearly a dozen native species in Oregon. It's one of the species hotspots of the world. Mostly, a lot of them are in Eastern Oregon, but we have 2 along the coast, maybe 3. It's culturally important species. It's an old species. It's really cool. It's also ecologically important because it feeds a lot of organisms, and these lamprey, some of them come and go, anadromous, they come into the ocean and they go back up the estuary, and some stay there all the time. So they're pretty neat organisms to look at and study. And also, since they're nocturnal, you almost never see them. So they're very difficult to observe. All right, next slide.
I just want to make sure, are people able to see the slides?
I believe so. I can.
Okay, great.
I can see it.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're coming through good.
Great. These are cool creatures.
So South Slough had some lamprey questions. Jenny sort of led this, I think, initially with the interest in lamprey. And so developed a couple of questions. So one is population trends. We want to know, we don't really know much about lamprey. So we want to know what's happening with the populations. How many are there in South Slough? And over time, is that changing, or is it getting more or less? We also want to know what the spatial distributions are. So where do they exist? Not just how many, but where they are. And also methods to answer those questions. So down below, you can see two different types of methods. We'll talk about both of these a little bit today. One is electroshocking, which is a common method to sample abundance. And the other, the new one we're looking at is environmental DNA. So looking at water samples and then looking at what organisms are in that water sample based upon a genetic analysis. Next slide. So the first question about population trends. Jenny selected 3 sites along Winchester Creek. You can see them there, they're kind of blocked out. They're kind of along, they're transects along the creek where they do electrosampling, just to see how many are there. So it's a special type of sampler. It's not the regular fish one. It's got a much lower voltage. It's called tickles. It tickles them out of the sediment, so they come up, and then you capture them and count them. And so basically we have these permanent plots, and we plan on looking at these over time. I think annual samples are planned for the foreseeable future, just to see what happens over time. Next slide. And so this is really about population trends. It's about abundance. So you can see, you can capture them with nets and then count them and measure them. So you can do a lot of work just seeing what's going on with the lamprey in that area. Next slide. So here's just 2 years of results at these sites. So you can see on the red there is 2018 and the yellow is 2019 abundance based upon, so it's a standardized based upon the amount of sampling that was done. And so you can see over time, this is only 2 years. They vary over time, but generally lower, there are higher numbers. And as you go up further in the watershed, there are lower numbers. You can kind of imagine if we did this for 20 years, we'd have a much better idea then of tracking those populations. Next slide. The other question is spatial distribution. And that's a different question. That's determining where they exist. And so in this case, Jenny was using the electrosampling method as well, but going up these tributaries and then keeping sampling until you find basically 5 pools that aren't inhabited. So it's a lot of work to go up there and climb up through all that brush and then have a crew of people with electrosampler and batteries and having to do all these points. And so you can see the dots, the blue dots are where they found them, and the crosses are where they didn't find lamprey. And then again, the permanent plots are the little square or little triangles. But it's difficult to the equipments and the staff, and also remember you're tickling these lamprey out, so you're disturbing the lamprey as well when you're doing this. So we thought maybe there's some other ways to do this. So next slide. So alternative method, this was a project we had going with Neuroscience Collaborative, looking at environmental DNA for fish species, but then we thought, well, how about using that for lamprey species? There are differences in the method. One is that it can provide presence data, but not abundance or number or sizes. So we don't get that. So that's why we'd want to do the abundance method using the electrosampling. It reduces sampling effort, and it's non-destructive. It doesn't have any sort of invasive method. I don't want to say that electrosampling is necessarily bad for the lamprey, but this is not affecting them at all. You just take a water sample, so you never have to even see the lamprey. And they're better to identify cryptic species. It's hard to tell these 2 lamprey species apart, especially when they're small, when they're below 6 centimeters. And so it's very difficult to tell them apart, whereas eDNA can do that very effectively. But it cannot confirm absence, so you're not sure they're not there, or abundance, and you can't get things about life stages. And you can't identify species without DNA sequences, but since we have the sequences for these species, that's fine. Next slide. So the uses, so we figured what we would do is we'd go upstream and downstream and take samples and see if we could do this species distributions using eDNA methods. Basically, you just take there, what you see there is the equipment. There's a pump, a peristaltic pump and a battery. There's a filter that's on that device there, the blue device there. There's a filter up behind that blue piece. You stick that in the water and you filter the water through it. We do about 3 to 5 liters of water. And then you just take that filter off, you put it in a bag with a desiccant, and you can send it off to a lab. We use a lab, Forest Service lab in Missoula, Montana, and they will tell you which lamprey species are in it. So the question we had was, how will it work? Does this work for what we want? Next slide. So here, it's kind of a busy couple of figures here, but if you look at the Pacific lamprey side there, you can see the squares are where we use DNA detection. And we found lamprey where there are green squares and not where the red squares. And so you can see it pretty well matches up because the triangles are the electrosampling data. And so you can see it matches up quite well with that, where we found lamprey. We can also look at the Pacific and Western brook lamprey separately. So on the other side, you can see the yellow circles are where we found Western brook, and the red circles are where we didn't find it. So we did this just to see if it would work, and we think it does work quite well. Next slide. So we know from scientific literature and from our local field tests that it works. And so and we can detect the two different species too, which is great. You don't need a special identification skills. You can just take water samples. And so that led us to the next step, which Deborah is going to talk about, is our citizen science program. Next slide.
Okay, so yeah, I have the privilege of working with Sean and the Forest Service folks, Rebecca Flitcroft over at USDA Forest, and with several volunteers. We were able to recruit our volunteers. We did a public service announcement, and we were able to attract not only our own current South Slough volunteers, but a few members of the general public. We did some training with them, both as a group and then as individual teams of 2. And as with all volunteer programs, you know, some of them kind of just for reasons of work schedules and whatnot, you know, did not stick with the program. But we wound up with a solid group of about 8 volunteers, so 4 pairs of people. In the picture here, you're looking at one of the teams. This is Reed and Victoria McNeely, and they're a couple, and they, one of them works at the hospital, the other is in management of a grocery store chain, and on their off time, they enjoy going out into the wilds, and so they wanted to help us with this project, and they did a pretty good job collecting data there, and Reed is in the stream getting ready to deploy the filter and start pumping. Citizen science volunteer basically is people who donate their time and participate in part through the whole scientific process. And so our volunteers are involved with collecting the data, but we also share that data with them. And there's a number of ways that we do that. We communicate via email. We also have a website. I have the hyperlink in the notes. I don't think we'll be able to bring it up here, but I can send in the chat box the link to the website and you can look at it yourselves. But it's really great because it's a website that shows the work the volunteers are doing. It's a place for them to write notes or blog about experiences they've had. It's also a place where we share other lamprey data. And 2 of the things we have on there right now is the U.S. Forest Service published an article about this process and this program that we're doing, and that link is on that website. And then there's also a really cool, Jenny Schmidt, through someone she works with NOAA, did a story map, and that is also linked on that website. So it's a really fun, kind of cool place to go just to participate in this. The Forest Service really helps with the volunteer management side of things. 2 of the staff there, Kim Winter, who's their Nature Watch coordinator, and Michelle Temez, have created a science community of practice. And we have regular cohort meetings, sometimes twice a month, but generally once a month throughout the season. And we check in on just issues that we may have with volunteers or with sampling or how to make it easier. Other people who are doing similar projects with volunteers share their ideas, some of the technology that they use. A lot of them use ArcGIS products like Survey 123 and Collector. So those are something that we discuss a lot on these cohort calls. They also talk about grants and reporting. I've discovered with the Forest Service that there's a lot of reporting that has to happen. So on the volunteer side, there's something called volunteer service reporting and Nature Watch database reporting. So that has to happen on a regular basis. But it is a really great, even with all the reporting, great to have the Forest Service as the resource, and they are also funding this grant that we're working on. You could change slides, please. So this is an example of a kit, and even though it looks pretty complex, this process has been tested out. This Kelly Karam, who put this together, there's other sites that use the same sampling kit, and the procedure is replicated throughout all of the places that are doing this kind of work. And it does take a little bit of training and a little bit of practice, but it's something that you can train someone who maybe does not have a science background, how to use the material and what to do. That's the positive side of it. The drawback side is pumps can be expensive and also kind of heavy. So it's not like you can send 20 of these out in the field at a time. Generally, you know, you can only send a team of 2 or maybe 2 teams of 2 because of lack of equipment and being able to keep track of everything. But that said, we did find some methods that work pretty well. Please change slides. So basically, Sean put together where we were going to sample, and it's kind of where the stream and the road points meet. And then we worked with our GIS staff, Jenny at the time, we didn't have Kiri on board as of yet then, helped us put some maps together. And then we use GPS either on our phones or a TomTom locator in the car to be able to find the site. And sometimes it takes a little bit of extra looking, but we've been able to get pretty close to the sites. And then the volunteer team would then, using the locator, take the sample kit to the site and log the samples, and there's a whole process that we teach them while we do that, and then they bring that information in the kit back to the lab, and then the volunteer coordinator there would then disassemble and get the kit ready for processing. Change slides, please. So this is an example of a site that we went to, and so if you volunteer for this, you get to go to really beautiful places like this and see where lamprey live and other fish and wildlife as well. So that's a really positive side of the work. And it's pretty straightforward for most of the volunteers to be able to do. It does take a little bit of physical agility because like, for example, with this site, we did have to climb down into it a little bit, but for most average people, it's not too much. So it is something that the average volunteer, as long as they have regular mobility and can move around pretty well, would be able to do. Next slide. So this is how Sean determined where to sample, and because we have to do it with the Slough Forest Service because that's what our grant is covering. So not just Coos Bay and Coos County, but we have to go north up as just about as far as Newport. And so he mapped the streams layers with the roads layers, and that's how he got the points of where we could sample. Next slide, please. And here is a real life sample kit in action at another beautiful location, as you can see. Sometimes you have to get a little creative with the stream flow. Like for example, with this, because the water's so shallow, the volunteer weighted it down so that it wouldn't, the filter cup wouldn't float up while it's going. So you're basically sitting there waiting for the pump to fill that yellow bucket up to the 5 milliliter line. And sometimes if the water is really turbid, you usually have to do that in a couple of tries. It's not going to fill up to 5 milliliters the first time because you'll have to change the filter. And you can also see the yellow device in the center of the screen is the GPS locator. So that tells you the latitude, longitude of where you're taking the sample. And then the little plastic bag with stuff that looks kind of like dirt in it. That's what Sean was talking about, the desiccant, where you put the dried filter. You have to use forceps to get that in there. The plastic bag is for all the materials that you don't touch again after you're finished. So there's a very strict protocol with the volunteers, since this is DNA we're working with, of not cross-contaminating from stream to stream. So we want to make sure that that's why we have the plastic bag to dispose of things that have been in one stream so we don't bring it to the next. And the big black thing, of course, is the filter pump. Next slide, please. And here are some of our volunteers training. This is at a close site, which is Sunset Bay. And this is one that, as you can see, just about anyone could easily get to. So some sites are much easier access than others. And the top, the volunteers are just getting ready to take the kit out of the sample backpack. And then down below, they're actually filtering. So on that one, because the stream is so low, we have a little stick that we use to help reach the pump down into the water so that they can pump it into the bucket. And and the gentleman in the bottom picture next to the tree is Ian, who was our volunteer coordinator last year, and he did a really great job. Next. And these are what the samples look like when they come back and they're get ready to be sent off to the lab. So Sean accepts all these and he gets them all organized, and then he mails it to the lab that does the protocol for the sampling. And that's how we get our results of what lamprey are there. Next slide, please. So I'm going to defer back to Sean in just a second, but some of the issues, I'll just talk about the volunteer issues. As with all volunteer programs, you're always looking for more volunteers because they're volunteers, they're not tied to the work, and they can decide to move away or go on vacation or do any of those things. So always looking for volunteers, that's the challenge. Some of the access can be a challenge, and we're trying to find ways to work on that, maybe adding some more layers to the map where we can tell if the access point is maybe kind of in a steep area, or maybe somewhere that has a land ownership issue, and maybe we can figure out how to ask permission ahead of time, or maybe move the sample site to somewhere easier to access. So those are some of the issues that we're kind of checking out during this time that we can't sample. And that's pretty much it for my side until we get to questions.
Okay, another thing about for getting volunteers, you can have nice t-shirts like this one. That was designed by our staff member, Daniel. You can see quite a nice creativity in that. So that keeps some volunteers on as well. So next slide. So results. So basically, along the coast, these are the plots we have sampled, or volunteers had sampled in 2019, 71 sites. You can see the, I've coded the Pacific lamprey as round, and if they're green, they're yes, present, and if they're red, they're no. And the Lampetra species, the Western Brook lamprey, they're the squares. Again, no is red and yes is green. So you can kind of see all up and down the coast where we've sampled and where we find the lamprey. So Pacific lamprey, we're at about 67% of the sites. So that's a lot. It's almost 70% of the crossings that we sampled. Western Brook, about the same, and then they had both species at about half the site. So there was a lot of overlap where you get both of them together, but sometimes you have one or the other. We did a comparison with electro fishing at 15 sites, and we found that we detected that all 15 sites had lamprey with with eDNA, and electro sampling had 11 sites, which is kind of expected because if you think about eDNA, it's in the water. And so it's actually integrating over a larger area. If you sample, electro sample, you're only sampling the pool that you're in, but the eDNA flows downstream. And so you're actually sampling a ways upstream from what you're doing. So it's integrating over the stream area or length. We have some preliminary ideas or hypotheses from this. And that Pacific lamprey appear to be more prevalent in small streams directly adjacent to the coast. And so you can kind of see that the green circles along the coast there, you have more green circles and fewer green squares. Whereas Western Brook lamprey appear to be more prevalent in smaller streams further inland. And so that's just some preliminary kind of thoughts. And as we expand this, we can do more sampling. And so we have an extension of the grant that Deborah put in for another 2 years for this project. They allowed us to move it this year. So we didn't have to do it this year due to COVID-19 restrictions on volunteers. So they gave us another year. So we actually have 2 years beyond this to do another approximately 80 samples. So we'll continue to do this for the next couple of years and fill in this distribution a little more. Next slide. And also, I just want to say a lot of people help with these. So here's a whole lot of people that we've talked with or have helped with this project, both in terms of the electro sampling and the eDNA sampling. So it really is a large collaboration that we're working on. And next slide, I think that's it, except for questions.
I noticed on there, this is great. I am so excited about this. And I noticed that Foss was involved with some volunteers. And Todd, it looked like your name appeared. Do you want to talk a little bit about your experience?
Sure, as soon as I can figure out how to unmute.
You've unmuted.
There we go. Start the video. Sure, what I did was, as a 30-year fish biologist, I didn't go out in the field. I did enough of that in my career, but what I did do is help facilitate getting the granting through the U.S. Forest Service, and Rebecca Flitcroft, who I know, and then helping Deb Rudd. She did all the heavy lifting, but I'm also the treasurer for FOSS, and so I write the checks. So that was my assistant.
Okay, well, it was appreciated. One of the questions I had, and I don't know, Deborah or Sean, this really cool method of testing the water for DNA, it tells you what species is in there, but it doesn't tell us how many of the species are in there, correct? Correct.
Although people are working on doing correlations between the amount of DNA and numbers, it's difficult because one organism could put out a lot of DNA, like a dead lamprey upstream. There might be a lot of DNA in the water versus there might be hundreds of lamprey that aren't putting out much. So there are people working on that, and there might be ways to get around that using genetics. But currently, yeah, it's not easy to look at numbers, abundance, using this method.
Yeah, it would be nice in the extended part of the grant research for the next 2 years, if there was some way of knowing. I think our Native American community too would appreciate it, knowing whether there are increases or decreases. I think Chief would probably tell us there's been a decrease in the number of lamprey. And so it would just be nice to know, are they recovering? And if they're recovering, what is it in the water or in their environment that is causing that? And Chief, you've unmuted, so you want to add something?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I didn't see any sampling on the Smith River, but early in my life, I've been in the late 50s, early 60s, at Smith River Falls was just covered with lamprey. And the last time I was up there, I didn't even find any. So you're right, there's been a big decrease, and it is very interesting to me to know whether they are on a recovery or not, and why they have really been decimated over the years.
Sean, do you have some scientific answer for that?
Well, that's what Jenny initially was doing with her abundance. So in the reserve, we are tracking abundance, but we're just not doing it far away from that because that's not really, we don't have the ability to do that sort of work. That's where the eDNA comes in. It's quite a bit easier with volunteers. We can extend our reach quite a bit. One of our interests actually is looking at barriers to lamprey distribution. So we can use this method to determine where barriers might be, and then sample above and below the barrier to see whether or not it's actually a barrier to lamprey, and then assess whether that's something that we should do something about if it is a barrier.
Oh, that's great. Any other questions? Bree,
I was going to add one other really cool thing about this. Even though you can't right now determine the number of organisms that you're detecting, what just the presence absence helps you do is if you get a presence, then then you could go back with more sampling equipment and do electrofishing. And so it helps target areas that you may not have wanted to put your efforts towards. So it does have limits, but it can help you design a more effective sampling plan.
Mm-hmm. Did I see someone else want to comment?
Yeah,
Robert?
this is Bob. I was just going to say it's a really interesting presentation and thank you. And you've kind of covered this a little bit right now, but using the eDNA to sort of set up an adaptive sampling, as you're starting to talk about, are there specific barrier sites? Somehow it's probably easier doing the eDNA, and you can then more get a broader coverage with the population abundance electrofishing approach. So you're on the right track. I think it's be very interested to see how this develops through time.
Deborah, am I correct in remembering that Trent Hatfield helped with this?
I was just sitting here thinking, do we want to call him out and embarrass him or not? But
he's not on the call, so.
Oh, okay, then we can talk about him all we want to.
Yeah, it's fair game.
Trent actually involved his older daughter, who he took out in the field, and they were a team, and they did some of the samples that you saw the results with on that graph. And we were going to this year work with Trent on helping him get his classroom students, because he's a science teacher, involved, but obviously because of COVID, we couldn't do that. So hopefully next year we can get his whole class involved somehow in doing some of the sampling.
Oh, that'd be awesome. Yeah, COVID has really put a cramp on a lot of things. Not to mention all the people that have died and gotten very ill, but it's just really, I feel like we're treading water in some ways and not able to get all the things done that we'd like to do, but we'll hope for better days ahead. Anyone else have any questions of our presenters? Thank you, Jenny, for your participation in this project as well.
I was thinking it would be great for the biology of fishes class, maybe next summer when COVID's hopefully behind us or we have vaccination, to have a whole class, if that would be useful, to have a whole class going. I know the fishes instructor would probably be excited if you wanted to do a little of electroshock fishing so they get to see them in person. But having a bunch of people there might help for more capture or something like that during the summertime.
We will remember that.
Volunteers, yes.
Okay, great. Well, I don't think all of us know the history of the lamprey and how ancient of a creature it is, and the importance culturally and food-wise to the tribes. They're just a very interesting critter. And as chief, I remember going up to Smith River Falls when I was in high school in Reedsport in the early 70s, and there were quite a few lamprey there as well. They kind of scared me. I didn't know what they were, so I didn't want to get in the water. So I finally got, my high school friends convinced me to get in the water, but I wore tennis shoes.
And the other thing, that's one of Doc's favorite subjects is lamprey. So we have great interest in it.
Yeah, he has mentioned that before. Yeah. So terrific. Well, thank you, everyone. I really appreciate this presentation. I like it so much. I wrote a note to myself that I'd like to present to the land board, and they've just been doing telephone meetings because this requires a visual, I think. So we'll see if maybe we'll do this in August or in the fall when we're actually in person or doing some kind of video, because I thought it was fascinating. All right, we'll move on to our information reports. And the first one we have is administration and facilities. And I assume you're doing that one, Rebecca?
Correct. I just have a couple things I wanted to comment on. The majority of our information since our last meeting is in your packets. Mm-hmm. The main thing that I wanted to comment is welcome to SABRA. It's great to have another CTP coordinator in place. That was the majority of any type of HR related stuff we've been doing for the last few months. The other thing I wanted to highlight is that in January or the first part of February, we submitted our FY20 applications for the PAC grants through NOAA, which is the acquisition and construction grants that are available to us to apply for every year. And this year, we actually were very fortunate to get both of the applications that we put in. One of them is for the acquisition for the entrance property at the visitor center. That is for $60,000 to go towards that purchase. The other construction award that we received was for trail upgrades throughout the trail system. And that's going to be $150,000. And it's going to include replacing some boardwalks, bridges, and then also updating all of the kiosk information centers. And then the last thing I wanted to highlight is our FY19 PAC award, which was for construction out at our maintenance compound. That grant actually was pulled for a NEPA review by NOAA. And in April, they finally released that to us to start using. So my facility supervisor, Mike, and I, we've been slowly working through the process to get permits and things like that. The county actually, part of this grant is to put in an RV host spot out at maintenance, and the county actually considers that an accessory dwelling. So we've started the permit process for that and to get approval. And then we're also working with our contracts person up in Salem to get our request for quotes out for some of the groundworks that needs to be done over this summer before the rain starts. So we're moving on that project. That's pretty much my admin and facility comments. I don't know if Bree has anything else to add.
I just had one project I wanted to share with the commission. So we are working with an economist from NOAA, Pete Wiley. He is transitioning out of being the national coordinator for the coastal training program. But he is an economist by trade, and he is delving more into economic type studies. So he selected the South Slough Reserve and the Great Bay Reserve in New Hampshire to do an economic impact study. And it has two parts. So the first part is to look at the spending, the direct spending that the reserve does and that our partners do. That's critical to the work that we're undertaking at the reserve. And then the second piece is trying to get a good handle on visitation and the economic contribution of visitors that come to the area and that use the South Slough Reserve. So Rebecca has done a phenomenal job. She's pulling together all the numbers for the direct spending. And then we have an upcoming meeting with the project team to talk about visitation. As you know, South Slough Reserve is pretty remote. We only have a few. Well, our visitor centers are a primary access point where we can actually count numbers of people during the work hours when we're there. So part of the study is to look at different techniques and methods for trying to count visitors in a remote setting like this. So we are hoping to have at the November meeting, I'm hoping I can share some results of that. It just depends on how quickly this all comes together. So as I mentioned, we're working with NOAA, with Pete Wiley, an economist there. There's a consulting group, the Environmental Research Group is involved, and then the Pew Charitable Trusts is funding part of the project as well. So I think it's an exciting project because I think it'll help us be able to talk about the valuable contribution that we make as a reserve to the local, Coos County area, but also statewide. So more to come on that.
I thank you, Bree. Bree and I had a meeting before the commission meeting today, and she shared that with me, and I just really got excited because there has been discussion over the years, excuse me, by different land board members to try to find some other manager of the South Slough so that we're not spending money from the Common School Fund to support the projects there. I have come to be entirely convinced, and so has my dog, that the South Slough is a critical component of education for Oregon. And it's an appropriate place for it to be in the Department of State Lands. And this is going to really help show how important it is to the community economically. And I do want to thank NOAA. Chris, NOAA has just been a tremendous partner. I know that's what you're supposed to do with these research reserves, but you have been a tremendous partner for the South Slough. We're very proud to be the first reserve in the entire nation. And so we really want to uphold our high regard and high standing and values. And the staff here have just done a tremendous job, as I'm sure you have heard today, and in their reports that go out every year. So I just want to thank NOAA for their participation.
Thank you. That's great to hear. Pass it along to others as well.
All right. Great job, Rebecca. We'll move on to education. And who's going to do that today? Deborah. Yay.
So I escaped from camp for a little bit to attend this meeting. That's where our other ed staff, and one of them's out of town right now, so it defaults to me. So I'll do my best. So the last in-person education program we had with a formal school was on March 11th. Jamie and Daniel went to Slough Elementary, and then, as everyone knows, the shutdowns and closures and things happened pretty rapidly after that. However, the education staff has still been busy. Some of the things, once we began teleworking, is we immediately met via phone and Zoom and things like that to identify projects to work on and to make priority lists on tasks that, you know, were kind of set to the side that we didn't have time to do. And we also were trying to figure out ways that we could still provide outreach and education to our public in a safe way. So some of the things that we've done, Kathy has been up here at the Interpretive Center, and she's been counting cars. So from April 8th to June 26th, she counted 201 cars. So I don't know how much of our trail usage that reflects, but that's just kind of a number that we can look at. Other things that we've done is we've collected numbers on virtual programming. So our new seasonal education assistant, Daniel, has been helping us quite a bit to figure out how to do some of these live programs. We worked with the stewardship program with Alice to do 2 stewardship outreach. We called it Stewardship in Your Backyard. So we had 2 of those programs. We used Zoom for that. And Daniel has done a Facebook Tie to the Toddlers live, and that was very popular. That was a great kind of interactive thing, and that was a combination of using Zoom and Facebook. And we have some future programming coming up. There'll be some story times, some more Tie to the Toddlers. And so just because we're restricted to meet with people in public, we have still found ways to continue to outreach and to do that with people. We're still hosting 2 summer interns because we have been allowed to do camp, but with the extra cleaning and restrictions, we definitely need more help than normal, which is why all of us are kind of on deck, all hands on deck doing camp, because it takes, for example, 4 people to check everyone in just for that process. So we have 2 interns. Both of them we lucked out because we can't offer housing. Our local students who are attending OSU online right now because they're just happen to live here in the area, so they moved back home. So that worked out really, really well, and they're both really great. Their names are Sabrina and Lucas. And then just a few future things. We're hoping to be able to support schools in the fall. Jamie has some ideas on the way that all the education staff can maybe provide some support that teachers are probably going to need as they face live education with all of these extra requirements and restrictions. And we're just kind of working as a team to, you know, make our work as safe as possible for the public. Jamie has been wrapping up the teacher workshops. The last 2 meetings were virtual, so she accomplished those for this year. Eric got all of our staff trained for this year's kayak work that needs to be done and made sure that everyone's safe with that, including our interns. Daniel has officially become our program lead for virtual programming. So he's done a lot of behind the scenes work, including creating an electronic cartoon character for kids, which is really awesome. And then I've been working, I did write a small grant through the Friends with Pacific Power to help support the internship program. And since our volunteers can't physically volunteer right now, I've been working behind the scenes to keep them engaged and to get them trained in our online volunteer record keeping system, which has worked out really great because I can't physically run around grabbing pieces of paper from people. So having an online platform has really helped. And that's pretty much it for the education report.
Well, you haven't sat around and done nothing. That's incredible. Nice work. Anyone have any questions for Deborah? I really like the outreach on video and Facebook and all of the other platforms, because the kids really miss that in classroom experience and hands-on. So it's nice. We have just started those, as Rebecca or as Deborah mentioned, and we're observing some really good safety protocols to protect the kids. Do you want to talk about the safety protocols, Deborah?
I can, sure. We wanted me to kind of talk about like the process for how we check in kids.
Yeah, and just you know, what size class we're limiting it to and that sort of thing.
Okay, so the first camp I was not involved in, but the education staff decided that they were too young to bring out in public, so they did a really cool online platform for the kindergarten age group, kindergarten, first grade. This week we're working with 2nd and 3rd graders, and so the process I'm about to talk about will be for all the camps that are in person. So basically they're limited to 10 students. What we do is we take 5 in the morning, we meet with them from 9 to noon, and then in the afternoon from 1 to 3, we have the other 5 students. We had to remodel the classroom as well as the upstairs area. Each student has their own 6-foot table that's covered in paper, and they each have their own trash can, their own bin to keep their personal supplies. If you were to come and walk around the interpretive center right now, you would see chalk lines everywhere that are all 6 feet apart. Inside, we tried to make it a little more fun. So instead of chalk or just an X, there's actual animal tracks taped to the floor that are 6 feet apart. We've kind of had to train the kids and remind them constantly about 6 feet being 6 feet apart. A lot of the kids do come in masks. They're not required at that age. We all wear masks anytime that we're with the kids. And of course, now it's a mandate that you have to wear them anyways, no matter what, but we already had that in our plan. We have to wash hands in between every activity that we change, or at least sanitize hands. So there's a lot of hand washing in the schedule. I'm trying to think what else we do. Snacks are no longer communal or anything. They're all individually wrapped snacks. Trying to think what else. Oh, when students arrive, so we have a whole process. The vehicle will pull up to a designated spot in our parking lot. One person has to be wearing goggles, a raincoat, a mask, have a thermometer to take temperature, and then the other person is the data recorder, and we have to ask the standard COVID questions like all of you probably get whenever you go anywhere. You know, do you have signs of a cough or fever, and you know, and so on, all those things. So we have to ask those every day. We have to write the time that the people arrived, how many adults were in the car, and what their names are. And then when the child comes out of the car, they can't leave until the temperature is taken to be sure that it's less than 100.4 degrees. And then the reverse happens minus the temperature when the children leave. So we still have to write the time they were picked up, who was in the car, and so forth. And they have to have their hands washed before they leave. So it's, as you can see, it takes a lot more people, even though it's a small group, to be able to accomplish that.
Thank you, Deborah. I just wanted the commission to hear that. I'm aware of all the work that's been going into it. You guys have done a really great job there at the South Slough to make it so that we could start these educational programs again. And it is a lot of work and a lot of extra work, cleaning and washing and recording, but I think that's the only way we're going to be successful at managing this education program for the kids. So my hat's off to you for doing a good job. All right, any questions? Any other questions of Deborah? If not, we're going to go into the science program update. Sean, are you doing that?
Yes, I am.
Okay, take it away.
Right, well, I'd like to point out in the packet, page 80, if you have a chance to look at that. As a graduate student, the first thing you'll hear about science is that it's not complete until it's published. I just wanted to congratulate our science staff. We have a phenomenal record now of publication this year. You'll see there's 6 publications in peer-reviewed journals from staff, Ali and Jenny, myself and Bree, and Alice have all been published this year in high-ranking, good journals for the work we've been doing at South Slough. So I just want to congratulate them, and I think that's a real metric of scientific success of the reserve. And secondly, on new notes, we just heard after we completed the packet that the Neuroscience Collaborative came out with their recommendation for funding, and we're involved in a number of projects over the next 3 years, kind of large research projects. One is looking at blue carbon sequestration in Pacific Northwest tidal marshes, led by Craig Cornu of Institute of Applied Ecology. One is looking at hydromodel of Coos Bay, led by Dave Sutherland from U of O, and Jenny is his contact on staff here. We also are working on a veg synthesis for sentinel sites, which is about how vegetation changes with climate change and sea level rise. And that's a large multi-reserve project that'll be rolling out over the next several years. There's also one that started actually with South Slough with this National Historical Wetland Extent comparison with South Slough and Laura Brophy of Institute of Applied Ecology. And now the reserve system has decided to apply that all around the United States. So again, I'd say we're leading some of that research. And finally, there's one marsh restoration success, a social science perspective that's being led by Kat de Rivera in Portland State University in the South Slough, and she's going to compare social perceptions of marsh restoration success in various places along the Oregon coast. And it's a collaboration between us and the Nature Wetlands Conservancy, I believe. And they're actually going to look and see how South Slough has changed people's perceptions on marsh restoration. And I think that'll be a great product for our 50th anniversary in a few years. So I just wanted to point those out too. And I'll leave the rest of it as in the packet. I think that's a pretty good descriptive of other stuff we've done.
Thank you, Sean. I made another note to myself that the land board needs to know about all this great work. I'm trying to figure out how to manage that, but I'm just stunned. I shouldn't be stunned because you all are really good at what you do, but all of the published work that you have, that's awesome. And the blue carbon sequestration project, that's so important. Definitely something that the governor is concerned about. So thank you for this report. And I read through it, and anyone else have any comments or questions for Sean? Okay, well, we'll move on to the
interjection. I meant to put stewardship on here because that kind of gets folded into science. So I wanted to just offer up if Alice wanted to share any updates from the stewardship program. Not required, but just wanted to make sure that was an option if you wanted to.
Thanks for putting me on the spot, Bree. Yeah, well, Sean did talk about some of the things that I've been involved in, the publications, as well as the vegetation synthesis funding that has just been awarded. I'm involved with that. Let's see, we've got the hunting map that was approved by the commission. Thank you very much for that. We have had a bit of a slow time just in terms of not having volunteers and interns available here. Running the virtual Second Saturday Stewardship program was a great way to get out into the community with the current restrictions and encouraging people to continue stewardship in the watershed and in their backyards, because that always benefits South Slough. And I'm sure there's plenty more as well, but given the short notice, I'll pass it on to the next person.
All right, thank you, Alice. Coastal Training Program. Are we going to have our new person give us that report?
Sorry, technical difficulties.
There we go, Sabra.
Hi. So I included a little bit about my personal background in the packet, but I will focus on the first, what I'm doing right now as I'm getting familiar with the position and with what South Slough does. I've been working off of a partners and contact list that John Bragg was so kind to leave behind. And I've been reaching out for phone and virtual meetings with partner organizations and affiliates, and just kind of doing one-on-one or small group getting to know you sessions, just getting to know the different organizations that are in the area, as well as what their experience had been with the CTP program in the past. And if there was any topics or issues or ideas that people have for trainings. These could be, pretty soon needs. So quite a few people have brought up the virtual platform hosting has definitely been something that quite a few people have been interested in. And going out a little bit further, there's been a lot of ideas brought up. I am still doing those talks, but I've been taking lots of copious notes. That's going to be turned into a topic list for training ideas going pretty much from the rest of 2020 out to the next 2 to 3 years. And then I'll be sharing that again with the people I've contacted and just kind of getting down into what groups have brought up similar topics and kind of circling back with folks just to get some of those topics rolling. And that topic list will be a living document that as new ideas are put forward, I can add to them. But it will be kind of a good way for me to get started and kind of see what I need to think about short-term versus long-term. Any questions?
Any questions from the members? We're delighted to have you here. And I'm glad that John left behind some items for you to kickstart your work. And I anticipate you're going to do great things. So welcome back to Oregon. And I can't think of a better place than Charleston and the South Slough area.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here.
Coos Bay to Empire, the whole South Coast. It's a great place to be.
Mm-hmm.
Says the Reedsport High School graduate herself. All right, thank you. Let's hear from the Friends of South Slough, Christine or Todd. Who's going to give us that report?
Go get him, Christine.
I'll start out and we'll pass the baton to Todd if he's got some things to add. I think we're on page 83 of your report. And I think Deb had provided a summary of our annual report to the membership that we did shortly before we were all shut down. So February was a busy time for us. We revised our bylaws and elected new officers. And I am the president, vice president, and treasurer is Todd. And we have a secretary, Maggie Bartholomew, who has a story of her own. She wants to retain her job as secretary, and her husband was in the Coast Guard, and as they were traveling across country to a new position on the East Coast, their trailer and pickup truck were stolen while they were at a hotel. So we've had a hard time keeping in touch with Maggie. I just heard from her she's going to be on our Zoom meeting next week. But this was quite a tragedy in their lives. As you know, the visitor center has been closed, and therefore the bookstore has been closed. So any economic models that we had put together about how the bookstore was functioning and anything to do with that have been certainly turned on end. And Todd, as the treasurer, has been working hard to try to resolve some of the issues that we have with banking and our credit cards and so forth, because when it was a busy place, we were using a credit card reader, and we don't need that anymore. So we're rethinking, as we put in the report to you folks, that Bree has noted over the years that I've been involved that the bookstore had kind of a creep in size, and there were some areas that when the visitor center opens again that they want to utilize for some displays. We want to reduce the footprint of the bookstore but provide relevant materials for public enjoyment. And so we're kind of working through that. In one respect, because of the closed situation, it's bought us more time, but at the same time, we've got to figure that out. And so stay tuned. We're moving forward on that. I think Bree had already proposed or provided the information that we were lucky enough to have been granted some money from a land trust that was closing down. And that money, the $25,000, was put as match for the acquisition of land at the entrance. All of us are anxious to have that completed, to remove a significant eyesore, but to also just provide an opportunity to improve the entrance and the completeness of what the reserve goals are. Let's see. Strategic planning is still going forward because we are focused on the 50th anniversary, certainly, and revisiting the bookstore. I think that the thing that is in the hearts of both Todd and myself is an interaction that we've been able to have with the Pew Charitable Trust and the Pacific Marine and Estuarine Fish Habitat Partnership, PMAP. We are now recipients of a small grant that we will be administering for a summary, and this is really germane to everything that DSL is doing, a summary of the efficacy, the failures and successes of eelgrass restoration along the whole entire Pacific West Coast. For those of us that have been concerned about this coast-wide, this is a great opportunity to provide some support for this kind of an activity and to partner with them, with the PMAP folks and with whomever the successful applicant is. The RFP is out and closes at the end of this month. So we're hoping that we have a good candidate to put this synthesis together. I've also learned that during, well, we've known that NOAA in California has had some guidance documents regarding eelgrass restoration that they've had in place for some time. They are very interested and are beginning to analyze the success and failures of about 71 different restoration projects. So I think this comes at a really pivotal time, and certainly for DSL that has to consider eelgrass restoration in any of its management opportunities and comments and requirements. I think this is really important stuff. So Todd and I are pretty excited as aquatic biologists to be part of this. And Todd has actually worked on some eelgrass restoration. So we've got our hearts in that one, and stay tuned for whomever is chosen, but we want to work really carefully to make it success. And then the final thing that I put in the report was that because we are independent from any agency, we're able to write letters of support, and we have written several letters to support different issues regarding aquatic policies in the state as well as nationally. So with that, maybe Todd's got some comments or anything.
Sure, just an update as far as our financials go. We've hired a new bookkeeper through Cardinal Services, and Christine and I and Charlotte have been meeting reasonably regularly to get our QuickBooks finances in order, so we know exactly what we will hope to know exactly what we're charging to which program, which grant comes out of, what money comes out of which grant, and et cetera, et cetera. That hadn't been quite as transparent in the past. So this will be, I'm feeling a lot better about it. Christine alluded to, there's been some issues with Umpqua Bank that I've been getting to know some people at Umpqua Bank all the way up to their corporate headquarters. So it's been very interesting and educational. And aside from that, it's been great. The only one other note is that I, along with Bree and Deb and some of the other South Slough folks, I had the opportunity to go back to South Carolina. Was it just a few months ago, last fall, for the, just seems like only yesterday. But it was a very interesting conference with all of the reserves, getting to interface with 15 other friends groups, hearing their trials and tribulations, and I'm still in contact with some of those folks. So that was really, really powerful. And I want to thank the friends for that opportunity to go back and do that. That's it for me.
Thank you both for your report. And I know Bree broke the bad news to me, the sad news, that the bookstore was scaling back, because I'm one of your big customers. My grandchildren always got something special when I went to the South Slough. And in fact, they wear their National Estuarine Research t-shirts quite frequently, only they're growing up now. And so I need a bigger size. So don't get rid of your t-shirts.
We will provide a special access for you, Vicki, anytime you want.
And books. I've gotten lots of books for them, and for the newest grandchild in the family, who's only 16 months old, but she is a book reader as well. So anyway, I appreciate all the work that you are doing, your strategic planning. It's really critical, as you know, for any organization to sit down and do that hard work of strategic planning. We're doing it at DSL, actually. We sort of got stopped with COVID, where we had to put everything down and try to figure out how we were going to manage staff and all of that. But I just mentioned the other day to our management team, we need to get back to the strategic plan. So we're planning on doing that in September. But your support of the South Slough has been tremendous, and really appreciate that you're working on making your organization better than it was ever. So it's always important to do that, to take that internal look. So thank you. And I sure hope Maggie and her husband are not left somewhere in the middle of nowhere with no vehicle, no transportation. My goodness, when did this happen?
What was it, about 3 weeks ago, and they were in transit. It was in Colorado, so they were halfway to Maine. They were going to be stationed in Maine, and it's just incredible. So they had to be there for at least a week to complete police reports. I think Deb's been in more of the loop, but they did recover the truck, but they had a small child, just a year old. So they had all of those kinds of things. The feds were moving them their big possessions, but they had their important things with them, and those have not been recovered.
Oh no, that's very tragic.
on top of COVID. So yeah, so this has been interesting, to say the least, and count your blessings.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for your report. Do any of our commission members have any questions of the FOSS team? Okay, seeing none, thank you all for your informational reports today. Always a pleasure reading them and hearing from you personally. Our next item on the agenda is to discuss our next scheduled meeting, which is November 19th, 2020. And only time will tell whether we will be in person or another Zoom meeting. I do hope it's in person. I would like to get down and see my dad. I haven't done that for a while. Bree, anything about the next meeting we need to know?
The only thing, we had talked about doing an eelgrass presentation at this meeting, but we ended up pushing that to the November meeting. So I think Allie will be presenting on the research that's been going on around eelgrass. She has a lot of grad students working on a diversity of projects. And so by November, we should have some summary of that for you, as well as the status of eelgrass in South Slough.
Oh, that'd be great. Allie, did you have anything to add to that?
No, just like Bree said, we've got 3 graduate students that are working on the environmental drivers, the potential drivers, and lots of modeling with habitat species distribution, as well as some statistical analyses called path analysis, which uses information from the eelgrass workshop that we held last year. So yeah, it'll be good.
Well, this will be really good research to have on hand should the Jordan Cove pipeline reinvigorate their project, because that was one of the areas that we were having difficulty with approving the project, was the fact that the eelgrass could not be properly mitigated. So this will be good information. All right, so November 19, I think that's the week before Thanksgiving. It sounds like it's close to Thanksgiving, but we'll stay in touch with you all about protocol and what we're doing here at the state level. All state employees are still encouraged to telework through the end of August, and I think a lot depends on whether we have continued increase in cases of the COVID virus, whether or not the governor changes that date. But as of now, we're still most of us working from home, and occasionally there's a few folks that prefer to work in the office here in Salem, and I think you have a couple in South Slough, and that's fine. I don't know, my dog's gonna go through withdrawals when I go back to work in Salem, but it's been good to be home with him. He had knee surgery 9 weeks ago now, and so he's almost back to normal. I just wish his hair would grow out. It looks kind of funny with him half naked on that right side where he had a bunch of hair. But he's doing much better for an old guy, and I'm doing much better for an old gal. So and Chief, yeah, we're both thumbs up on that. All right. Anything else? I'm going to open it up to any of the commission members to see if you have any final comments before we sign off for the day.
No, just thanks for the updates.
Okay, Bob? Nope, I saw him light up. But Lonnie, how are you? All good?
No, we're still sheltering. We're still sheltering in place in South Carolina, but we're pandemic or no, planning on coming home this fall. Just gotta brace ourselves for how to navigate cross country in the motorhome, you know, while wearing masks and gloves, and you know, making sure that we're trying to keep a distance between us and any COVID germs that are floating around.
Yeah. What part of South Carolina are you in?
Anderson. We came out to visit my brother in January, and then the pandemic hit, and so we've been sheltering in place in Anderson, South Carolina ever since.
Oh my goodness! Wow.
It just seemed safer to stay put and not go out and just, you know, stay in our motorhome. And boy, am I glad we bought this 40-foot BM because because we did not plan to become full-time RVers. But if you have to become a full-time RVer without any advance notice, a 40-foot motorhome is definitely a good way to do it.
Well, good for you. And Chief, got any parting comments for us? You're doing well?
Doing well. Got another appointment in late August, so find out a little more.
Okay.
Feeling
Awesome.
fine and doing good.
Awesome. Good to hear.
Little cabin
Bob?
fever, though, maybe.
I'm sorry, what?
Little cabin fever. We've been sequestered here. I don't know what the rest of the world even looks like, hardly.
Yeah, a lot of folks have that cabin fever, that's for sure. And I just don't want them to get reckless when they go back out. Let's see, Bob, you're still with us. Did you have any parting comment?
No, just thanking everyone for their great updates and presentations.
Okay, and Chris, you always are patiently on the call. Did you have any final comments for us today?
I just wanted to congratulate and thank the staff for all the work you guys are doing and continue to do through these really different times. And I'm impressed and amazed at how you are finding creative ways to pull it off and keep things going. And I know that budgets are impacted and barriers are being put up to make all these things more difficult. So kudos, honestly, for everything you're doing. And I know Bree Turner is your main liaison in connection to our program as well, but use her as needed. But certainly if there's other things, areas you guys could use some technical assistance or wishes or hopes in areas we might be able to connect you to or find other ways to help out, you're always welcome to ask, and we'll see what we can do to help you guys.
Great, thank you so much. I think you guys are allowed to use Teams on the feds, but just not Zoom. So maybe we'll do Teams sometime.
I'm pretty sure I've tried every platform there is out there so far, if anyone wants a candid analysis. But Zoom is the only one with official restrictions within NOAA at this point in time.
Yeah. Okay, great. Well, thank you all for coming out today, even if it is in your living room or your office at home or your bedroom or wherever you happen to be. It was a pleasure to visit with all of you today. Have a great rest of your summer, and we'll all gather again hopefully in November with better word about the COVID virus. All right, I'm gonna bang my gavel and call this, I'll take a motion to adjourn first, however.
Just one
I so
comment.
move.
Okay, Dave moved to adjourn the meeting. I have a second from Chief Brainerd, and it's not debatable, so we're done. And thank you all very much.
Thank you, everybody.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
All right.
So Lonnie's the only one left, looks like. I'll go ahead.
We stop the
Yeah, I'll stop the recording and then I'll stop the live YouTube.